endorsing America as a failed social experiment.
How do we tell this story in a way that builds the kind of emotional momentum that colorblind ideology builds?
So many young brothers and sisters of the younger generation find themselves so far removed from the best of their past.
What are we going to make out of the nothing we've been given? How do you envision possibility? Welcome, everybody. Good to see you here. I'm Trisha Rose, and you're on the tightrope, and we're here with my dear friend and colleague and co-host, Dr. Cornel West. And we're going to chat for a little bit, giving a part two kind of update / closure to the situation at Harvard. Some things have transpired since then, and we thought some of you might be interested in hearing from it and to have Cornel talk about where things stand now. Cornel, it's good to see you as always, my dear.
It's always a blessing to be in conversation with you, and I know you are as strong as ever. It's a beautiful thing.
I'm hanging on. I don't know about that, but I'm hanging in there. I'm trying to stay up on the good foot, So, we have a lot of friends, colleagues, critics, official people who are interested in what may have happened since the last update on the tightrope. And so I wanted to invite you to share sort of, where things went. I think what the faculty responded in certain ways, and then what sort of transpired after our last conversation.
I found out once again that I've got to be one of the, if not the most blessed Black man in late modernity. All the love, all the support, all of the overwhelming genuine compassion for me has really been touching. I got a note from the Black mama from St. Louis. It really brought tears to my eyes. I thought about my own beloved mother, Irene West, 88 years young, in Sacto, and they were just deeply concerned about the plight and predicament, the situation, the levels of disrespect, the unfair treatment, and so forth. It was just a beautiful thing. But the crucial thing, of course, is to democratize this situation. And what I mean by that is it affects so many different people in different ways who are in situations much worse than that of myself. This kind of chronic disrespect, this chronic devaluing, the chronic underpaying, the chronic marginalizing in terms of certain criteria. Now, of course, I could. People say, oh, you very popular. Oh, you very mainstream. You on TV, you at Harvard, and so forth and so on. And that's true, but it's not as if in those contexts, you still don't have white supremacist bombardments coming at you. And when you use that kind of language, you can imagine people saying, well, how could it be racist? How could it be white supremacist bombardment? How could it be ideological bombardment? Because once you get up there, you ought to be satisfied. You got a decent salary, you got a decent status.
What do you have to complain about?
And you say, good, exactly. What do you have to complain about? You say, look, I'm a human being. I'm a human being. And all of us ought to be able to draw lines in the sand in terms of being disrespected in that regard. I mean, what's interesting for me is, of course, the array of critics who can never begin with any possibility of being disrespected or unfairly treated. They're only concerned about their issues. They're concerned about their community. They're concerned about their situation. And that's just a human thing, it's just a lack of empathy. It's Chekhov all over again. People unable to get outside of their own skin and try to, for a moment, to get inside of somebody else's skin. And what I've always tried to do is try to get inside of other people's skin, even the people who hate me, even the people who despise me, even the people who do value me. That's why they're still brothers. That's why they're still my sister, no matter how vicious their views are. But I'm still someone who's going to be very vigilant about opposing lies.
Right.
And so if they can't see Harvard disrespect me, they can't see Harvard devalue me, they can't see Harvard in any way engage in unfair treatment, then they're just not seeing enough. They're just too blind in that regard.
Right. I mean, it is understandable that people who are not in these, very intensive academic environments could imagine that, one should be happy here, right? It seems. And
Absolutely.
Certainly it's much better labor conditions than many, many other places, and we should not be nonchalant about that. But that said, there's an extraordinary exertion of ideological pressure. And it happens in ways that I think might be inaccessible, right, to people, hard to understand how powerful that can be. And it can even explain why, people who look like they're at the center because they're in certain places, like you being at Harvard, don't understand that you're not at the center in the context of Harvard. You're here by any means. And so in terms of faculty response, what were some of the responses of your colleagues since our last conversation?
Well, I mean, we've had both faculty, Divinity School and Afro-American Studies departments vote to initiate a tenure review. Mm-hmm. And that was after the public outcry, after certain tremendous pressure brought to bear by students and staff and people inside of Harvard and outside of Harvard as well. Mm-hmm. And then there's individual, professors, good God Almighty, Professor Ron Sullivan, Professor Stephanie Robinson, Professor David Carrasco, Professor David Lambert, Professor Brandon Terry, and others. I mean, they've been deeply, deeply concerned, and they've been wonderfully loving in this context. There's no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. Now, on the other hand, I've had some critics who stoop pretty low in terms of their attacks on me. My dear brother, Rabbi Jonah Steinberg, who I look forward to talking to. I just discovered today that he's reached out and sent emails to me, but he sent emails that I have no access to. So I didn't even know that he reached out until he talked about it in the newspaper, saying I'm scourging discussion and don't want to be involved in a dialogue with him. I'd ask for a dialogue with him. I'll dialogue with him any minute, any second, any context, any situation. He called for a garden. Garden's fine with me. We could talk in the street. We could talk at his house. We could talk at my house. I've never been one to pull back on this discussion in that regard. But he had started off with such an ugly tone, though, saying that I had demanded tenure all by myself. Well, he's wrong on the facts. He's talking about, well, a critique of Israeli occupation is mainstream in the Harvard faculty. If that was a disqualification, the Harvard faculty would be decimated. Well, that's simply not true. There's not massive public critiques of the Israeli occupation on the Harvard faculty in that regard. He said, I'm egging on the students and trying to somehow push them in a direction that's tied toward an anti-Semitic conspiracy. I said, you got to get off the crack pipe. He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know what I've been about for the last 40 some years and so forth. You see, if there's ever been somebody fighting anti-Jewish hatred and prejudice, I got a long record of that. But my struggle against anti-Jewish prejudice is exactly the same as anti-Palestinian prejudice and anti-Black prejudice. So if we're going to talk about the struggles against anti-Jewish contempt and anti-Jewish hatred, I'm there. But I'm also there for anti-Palestinian hatred. I'm there for anti-Black hatred. And that has to be wrestled with both inside the Jewish community and outside of the Jewish community. Yeah. I can be critical of anti-Jewish hatred in the Black community. Absolutely so. But anti-Black contempt in the Jewish community, I want to see what kind of evidence we're talking about. Anti-Palestinian hatred in the Jewish community. That's what I'm calling for Brother Steinberg on. I want consistency. And we'll get a chance to talk. I just discovered today that he reached out, and I appreciate that.
I mean, it would have been nice if he'd left a message or something. I mean, it seems a little odd that you're not responding to email assumes that you got it. I mean,
exactly.
I can't imagine your email inbox because I can't barely keep up with mine.
And I don't even think he's probably got the Harvard email. I don't get Harvard emails, but he also knows I've got good friends.
It just would have been nice.
Amitai and others. These are magnificent human beings who have access to him. So if he really wanted access to me, I'm sure he could get it. But we're going to get a chance to talk and dialogue over this thing.
I think that's good. So just one quick point of clarification. So the reason you sort of zeroed in on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict as a reason why you think the administration was reluctant to offer you tenure had to do with the way they characterized, in your version of events, characterized you as being too controversial, basically. Absolutely. And you were trying to sort out what could be so controversial. And you went through a list of various political positions or alignments, you and Bernie Sanders and other things, and you settled on this being the most controversial of your opinions that may have some traction, I guess, in this setting. Is that
I mean,
right?
both absolutely right. That's clarifying. It's the biggest taboo issue at the moment. One, in terms of a serious, sustained, robust, respectful dialogue on an issue, and secondly, that I had said that I discern a pattern. There's been a number of faculty members who have been turned down for tenure, all of whom have been major critics of the Israeli occupation of Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not as if there's no evidence. You know, when Brother Steinberg says, well, this is absurd on the face of it, there's no evidence. There is some evidence. And I've got even more than that in terms of anecdotes and stories behind the scenes and so forth. So it's not as if I'm somehow just living in some cuckoo world when it comes to the claims that I'm making. And if he thinks that somehow there's some overflow of voices that are highlighting the Palestinian plight and predicament and the Palestinian cause in the Harvard faculty, he's living in a different world.
Yeah, that's the other Harvard faculty, apparently.
I'm telling you, absolutely.
So Cornell, so tell people, what was the final decision then? What were you, are you leaving Harvard? You want to confirm that? Because again, I know.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm on my way back to Union Theological Seminary. I was blessed to receive a number of different offers from institutions all around the country. Again, very, very, very blessed in that regard. But returning back home to Union Theological Seminary, can't wait. Dietrich Bonhoeffer position there with Sister Serene, Brother John, and the others. Yes, Brother Gary and the others. Sister Kelly. We're gonna have a good time. I know Brother Andre was just teaching there. Yeah, they loved him. They loved his work there.
Yes, they did. They did love him, and they're gonna love you. I'm sure they jumped for joy when they heard you were heading back. So just for, but it's a really esteemed institution that has a very specific legacy that you are a critical part of, beginning with James Cone, liberation theology. And so let's close on, because it's such a powerful concept and practice. Can you just share a little bit about that and how that institution has played a role and how you imagine contributing to that in this next stage?
Well, the beautiful thing about Union Seminary is that it goes all the way back to the 19th century, where it's rooted in prophetic vocation, prophetic calling that's tied to a recalling and an invocation, a sense of history, being part of a tradition that's focused on the plight of the least of these, the focus on the vulnerable ones. So liberation theology is the claim that God is in fundamental identification with oppressed people, with subjugated people, with dominated people, that they have a humanity that's never reducible simply to their social status, that they're precious, that they're sacred as persons made in the image of a God, that connects then vocation to a prophetic tradition leading toward fundamental transformation of self as well as society, and on to trying to basically, protect the world from catastrophe, given ecological crisis that we're in. And seeing such a commodified world and commodified universities, commodified colleges that have a deep sense of vocation at a Union Theological Seminary makes all the difference in the world. And that's one of the reasons why it produced the towering figures like Beverly Harrison, Paul Tillich, Reinhold Niebuhr, James Cone, James Washington, James Forbes, Tom Driver, Bob Seaver, Gary Dorian, Serene Jones. We can go on and on and on. Brother Sam, it's so many towering figures. Sister Daisy is there at Union. Mentioned Kelly already. It's a place that cultivates prophetic calling, prophetic vocation, connected to prophetic recalling and prophetic invocation, prophetic tradition. And it always leads towards some kind of revolution. Revolution of spirit, revolution of values, revolution of priorities, revolution in society, revolution of self, and a transformation of how we look at the world, a transformation in how we feel about other people, and most importantly, a transformation in our ability to act more courageously and compassionately. That has always sat at the center Union's sense of what it was. And that's one reason why I've returned now 4 times. This is the 4th time I returned to Union.
Well, 4th time's the charm, Cornell. 4th time's the charm. But listen, there's a special charge that you have now. I mean, to carry this tradition forward of an alignment and representation of the least of these. I mean, we're in an era that is going to be very, very difficult for people. The crisis of inequality hasn't even crashed to the bottom yet, given what's happened over the past year. And so, Union has a way to, as a capacity to really, make its mark again further into this moment, right? Because this is a special moment. They're very lucky to have you there helping think through what does it mean to be courageous and in alignment, right? In this moment and in the moment that is to follow. And how can we be leaders and visionaries for that? I think they couldn't have anybody better than you for that, Cornell.
Well, I'm blessed to be there, but I appreciate your words, my dear sister. I'm very blessed to be there. And we need each other. Union has no monopoly on this kind of commitment. There's individuals who committed like yourself at Brown and like people in colleges all around the country. You know what I mean?
That's true. We should all go to Union. Just scrap it. We're all going to. We're all join the caravan of love. We're heading to Union. You call Serene up and tell her we're all coming.
We all on our way.
Well, thank you, Cornell. Thank you so much for sharing where things are. And I know people will be happy to hear where where things are going. And, you can be anywhere in the world and people are going to want to hear and learn and be in intellectual and solidarity and community with you. So good luck. And we will see you in New York for sure.
Absolutely. Come on to the Big Apple.
All right. We'll be down. We'll be down.
Prophetic swinging.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us on the Tightrope. We'll see you again real soon. Take care.